Have you heard what that guy Peter Zeihan says about China? He's a guy that fans put on my radar maybe 9-10 months ago, and I didn't know who he was, so I started following him, and then he got on Rogan. I was like, oh, there goes that.
Sure.
But now people still ask me to bring him on all the time. He's a very smart guy. I like him. He's one of those dudes, though, who's like so smart that he comments on every single thing with a hardcore opinion.
Okay.
So it's like, I kind of break it down like this. He's probably like damn near 100% right on half the things he says.
Okay.
And then of the other half, there's 25 and 25. 25 where he's kind of got a mixed bag, where he's got themes right, and maybe a couple things where something's out of context or slightly off. And then 25 where it's probably like, all right, that's probably not right, or you're looking at this the wrong way. And God knows if I can put everything in the right box. I wouldn't be sitting here if I were smart enough to do that.
Okay.
But you know, I mentioned it earlier a little bit. He talks about the demographic problems in China and the supply chain problems and what's going on there and how this is actually going to have sort of the opposite effect. And I'm tying that together in my head with your historical timelines you brought up, where you talked about how, for example, in the 60s, shit was bad, and then the Soviet Union fell in, let's say, like 1991 or 1992, what the official date was. So it fell throughout the 80s. You had the cooling off period, right? And then culminates with that. So you had good around the corner of bad. Could it be lining up that the things you're talking about with China, because of some of these other problems that Zeihan points out, perhaps they are correct there, they're lining up in a way such that, you know, you're going to kind of have, for example, like some of the COVID shit backfire on China like we're already seeing, and we're going to have that good thing around the corner where maybe in the 30s enough of their people rise up and overthrow the CCP, which, you know, David Satter was in here and talks about it. It only took 15% of USSR's society to overthrow the USSR.
Before the KGB, there was the NKVD in the 30s that was responsible for murdering hundreds of thousands of people.
Like the pogroms and stuff?
No. Pogroms were ethnic, anti-Jewish for the most part. Riots.
Right.
No, this was the Great Terror during the 1930s that Stalin launched against real and imagined opponents in order to bring the country completely to its knees.
You know, I'm not saying it could be the same in China, but like, you don't have to get like 60% of the people to do it. You get a really, really loud group of people who are willing to put their names and beings behind it, and it can happen. You know, maybe these trends, maybe some of these things we're seeing with starving populations, people who are dirt poor, you know, being locked down in their houses with COVID, with drones monitoring them. You saw some of those little riots that were happening, and they weren't that little, actually. You know, and I think it was like maybe October, November. You know, and then the CCP had to end those guidelines they had because they realized, oh shit, right? Like, do you think that can kind of solve itself?
I think if it gets to that point, if we think a lot of people are dying now, I can only imagine how many innocent people are going to die in a circumstance like that. Because China, the amount of progress that they have made in the past 30 years is undeniable. You went from what was arguably a third world country for everybody, where there was starvation across its entire population. You've seen a rise in capitalism because of a shifting in policies, that because capitalism works, it has given more resources and more equity and more financial services to average everyday people. I don't think the Chinese will go quietly into the night giving any of that up. And they like the presence that they now have on the world stage. And to give that up and to just let their own people revolt or overthrow the CCP, millions would die in the process before that would happen.
Well, they wouldn't let them. We know that. We know that. And that's a shitty reality you bring up. Millions would die. You know, that is their country, though.
Yeah.
Right? People care about their ability to be free and things like that. And people are, throughout history, have been heroes and laid down their life. And God knows, I don't want to get involved in telling people what to do or whatever, but I saw cracks in the foundation. I saw people in October, I think it was October, November, who looked like they were at their wits' end. They looked like the kind of people who, I don't want to use the term death wish, but they looked like the kind of people like, you know what? Put a fucking bullet in my head if this isn't going to change, because I'm going to do that myself if you don't.
Well, Julian, we are living in a country that was founded from people who did exactly that.
Yes.
I'm in a part of the country now where people said things like, give me liberty or give me death, because of all the things that you're talking about. And I think those things are not only important to the American story, but I think they're important to the human story. And the reason why I'm so bullish on America as a nation is because even with all our problems and even with all our political divisiveness that we have, America has always stood for those values. And the reason why I think we're going to win on a long enough timeline is because all our adversaries that we've talked about at length in this podcast, they don't stand for those things. And if you give history enough time to unfold in the manner that it will, in my opinion, I think the world wants to stand for things like equity and freedom and liberty and freedom and values to as many people in as many places as possible. And I think America has always been the driving catalyst of those things, not only because of the founding of the nation, but because of what we believe in, and more specifically, what Western culture believes in as a whole. And I think part of the reason why the United States does as well as it does from an economic standpoint, and part of the reason why Europe does as well as it does from an economic standpoint, is because those values are interwoven into the economic system in those countries.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.